Every one of us has days where our brain feels like a glitchy browser tab constantly loading worst-case scenarios. One moment we're vibing and minding our own business, and the next our mind starts overthinking, replaying embarrassing moments, doubting everything we do, or imagining disasters that aren't even real. Negative thoughts hit fast, and if we don't know how to handle them, they can drain our energy, kill our confidence, and mess up the whole day. But the truth is, your brain doesn't hate you and you're not broken. It's just running old programming designed to protect you from danger. In this video, we're breaking down exactly how negative thinking works and, most importantly, how to take back control using psychology, logic, and practical moves that actually shift your mindset from spiraling to steady. Let's upgrade the software in your head and stop negativity from running your life. The sneak attack of the mind. Negative thoughts don't knock before entering. They crash into your head like an uninvited guest who raids your fridge and switches off the lights. One tiny mistake, one awkward moment, or one random fear, and suddenly your brain starts running a whole Netflix series of worst-case scenarios. What's wild is that nothing in the outside world changed. You were fine 5 minutes ago, and now you're spiraling over imaginary disasters. That mental ambush is exactly what we're here to expose. A lot of people think negative thinking means there's something wrong with them, but honestly, it's just how the brain evolved. Back when our ancestors lived in forests fighting tigers, snakes, and starvation, the brain developed a warning system to scan for danger. Spotting a negative possibility, like a predator hiding in bushes, literally kept them alive. Fast forward to today, there are no tigers in your living room, but the brain hasn't updated its software. It still acts like every small issue is a life or death situation. That's why modern worries, failing a test, getting ghosted, messing up at work, embarrassing yourself in public, feel huge, heavy, and scary. The brain zooms in on anything that could go wrong, even if it's totally harmless. It's like your mind using a magnifying glass on problems that don't deserve that much attention. Understanding that negativity is a default survival mechanism is the first step, because once you get that it's not your failure, but an outdated system, you stop feeling controlled by it. So the mission ahead isn't about forcing your brain to never think negatively. That's unrealistic. The goal is to learn how to spot negativity when it arrives, understand why it's there, and gain the power to respond differently instead of getting dragged into the spiral. Once you start seeing negative thoughts as background noise instead of absolute truth, you automatically gain leverage over them. And that's exactly where your transformation begins. Why the brain loves negativity. Here's a weird truth. Your brain is biased, and not in your favor. It pays way more attention to negative experiences than positive ones. You could get 5 compliments today and 1 random insult, and guess which one you'll think about before sleeping? Yeah, the insult. And it's not because you're dramatic, it's biology. The brain treats negativity like a threat and stores it deeper because ancient survival instincts still run the show. In neuroscience, there's a term called negativity bias, which simply means the brain assumes bad stuff is more important than good stuff. This mechanism once protected humans from predators, poisonous food, dangerous tribes, anything that could kill them. Today, the threat is just someone laughing at your presentation or you overthinking a text message. But the brain doesn't know the difference. It reacts as if every social mistake equals danger to your existence. What's even crazier is how this bias snowballs. When your brain focuses on negative thoughts, it activates stress chemicals like cortisol. Cortisol amps up alertness, keeps you tense, and makes your mind scan for even more danger. Basically, one negative thought invites 10 more like a group chat nobody wants to be part of. That's why sometimes you can spiral over nothing. The biology inside you becomes a self-feeding loop. But here's the twist that gives you power. If negative cycles are based on instinct, you can override them using conscious logic. Knowing the brain's pattern means you can catch it in the act and push back. Instead of thinking, "Why'd I always think negatively?" you'll start thinking, "Oh right, this is just my brain being dramatic again." That mental shift turns negativity from a storm that controls you into rain you can walk through, still annoying, but not dangerous. Learn to catch the thought in real time. One of the biggest keys to stopping negative thinking is learning to notice it the moment it appears. Most people don't realize when a negative thought slips into their mind, and that's exactly why it becomes so powerful. It sneaks in quietly, sits down, and starts taking up space until your entire mood changes without you noticing where it started. Awareness is your first defensive move. When you recognize a negative thought right when it shows up, you break the automatic chain reaction that normally follows, and suddenly the thought loses its authority. The magic begins when you stop treating your thoughts as facts. The human brain throws out thousands of thoughts every day, many of which are exaggerated, irrational, or flat out wrong. So when one pops up and says, "You're not good enough," or "Things are going to go badly," don't accept it like a message carved in stone. Pause for a second and simply identify it as a thought. Label it mentally. This is self-doubt, this is fear, this is my brain panicking again. The moment you label a thought, you create separation between you and the thinking itself, and that distance is what prevents the thought from immediately turning into emotion. This habit may feel weird at first, because most of us are used to reacting instantly to whatever our mind produces. But if you treat every thought as a notification instead of a command, you gain control. You're not the thought, you're the observer of the thought. Just like you wouldn't believe every random stranger giving advice on the street, you don't have to believe every statement your brain makes. Thought awareness is like switching on the lights in a dark room. Suddenly the shapes and shadows stop looking so scary because you can actually see what they are instead of assuming the worst. And the more you practice catching negative thoughts in real time, the easier it becomes. Over time your brain learns that it can't push you around anymore, and the negative loops that once felt automatic become weaker and shorter. You're basically retraining the same system that once worked against you. Catching the thought is the moment you grab the steering wheel back from your brain. It won't stop negativity forever, but it ensures that negativity doesn't get to run your whole day without being challenged. Question the thought, don't worship it. Once you catch a negative thought, the next step is to challenge it. Most negative patterns survive only because people don't interrogate them. They accept every fear, doubt, or insecurity as if it's the final truth. Your brain throws out a statement like, "I'm going to fail," and instead of asking why, you emotionally react to it, panic, and behave as if failure has already happened. But if you pause and question that thought like a detective, you'll realize how flimsy most of them actually are. Ask yourself, is this thought based on facts or assumptions? Do I have real evidence, or is my brain just predicting doom because it's anxious or unsure? This questioning process doesn't need to be complicated. You're not trying to solve a scientific equation, you're just shining a logical flashlight on whatever your brain is claiming. For example, if the thought is, "Nobody likes me," push it back with reality. Who exactly? Can you name a person who said it? Did someone actually prove it? Or is it one awkward moment blowing up into a universal statement? You'll start noticing that many negative thoughts are dramatic exaggerations, built from emotion rather than actual data. When you challenge them, they start shrinking in size because logic cancels out fear faster than you expect. An important thing here is to stay neutral rather than blindly positive. The goal isn't to switch immediately to, "Everything is amazing," because fake positivity is just as unrealistic as negativity. You're not trying to deny problems, you're trying to see things clearly. Instead of, "I'm bad at everything," a more accurate thought might be, "I'm struggling with this right now, but I can improve." It feels honest, balanced, and grounded. The objective is clarity, not blind optimism. When you argue with negativity using facts, your brain slowly learns to stop jumping to the worst-case scenario every time things feel uncertain. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. Negative thoughts start dissolving the moment you stop giving them blind obedience. When your brain realizes you won't automatically believe every scary story it tells, it stops producing those stories as aggressively. Challenging your thoughts turns you from a passive consumer of your mind into the critic, editor, and fact-checker of your mental narrative. And when thoughts become something you examine instead of obey, you break the emotional attachment that fuels negativity. Break the spiral physically. Once a negative thought starts looping, it rarely stays just a thought. it turns into a full mental spiral. Your brain keeps replaying the same worry, fear, or memory like a stuck playlist, and the more you stay still, the stronger the spiral grows. This happens because the mind and body are wired together. When your brain senses a threat, your body tenses up, and when your body stays tense, your brain keeps assuming danger is real. That's why sitting and brooding usually makes negativity 10 times worse. The fastest way to interrupt that pattern is to physically move. Action snaps the mind out of autopilot and forces your brain to switch gears. You don't need some deep gym workout or a dramatic routine. Literally any physical shift works. Stand up, stretch your arms, take a walk to the balcony, splash cold water on your face, or step outside for a 2-minute breather. Even something tiny like changing your posture or unclenching your jaw signals to your brain that the threat has passed. Your nervous system calms down when your body stops acting like you're being chased. Physical movement breaks the brain's imaginary emergency and cuts off the fuel-feeding negative loops. This strategy may sound too simple to matter, but biology proves it's legit. When you move, your body releases chemicals that counter stress hormones. Your breathing changes, your heart rate adjusts, the tension drains out, and most importantly, your focus shifts from internal thoughts to external actions. A mind can't spiral deeply if the body refuses to stay frozen. That's why scrolling, lying in bed all day, or sitting still while overthinking feels torturous. It traps your brain inside its own stories. Movement acts like hitting reset on the mental radio so it can finally change stations. Eventually, you'll discover patterns. Certain actions help you break spirals faster. For some people it's stepping outside, for others it's music, journaling, cleaning their desk, or just taking a brisk walk. The goal isn't to escape problems, it's to stop the body from reinforcing imaginary danger. Negative thinking feeds on stillness, isolation, and inactivity. Break those three, and the thought spiral loses momentum. You interrupt the loop long enough to take back control and handle the situation rationally instead of emotionally. Replace the thought with reality, not fairy tales. A lot of people think the solution to negative thinking is to drown it in blind positivity, but that's where most self-help goes wrong. If your brain is telling you, "I'm going to mess this up," and you slap on a cheesy line like, "I'm the greatest person alive," your brain rejects it instantly because it doesn't feel true. Forced positivity triggers the same resistance that fear does. So instead of switching to unrealistic claims, the smarter move is to replace a negative thought with something balanced, practical, and rooted in reality. The goal is not to lie to yourself. It's to remind your brain of facts it forgot while panicking. When you're stuck in a negative loop, try reframing the situation with neutral or realistic alternatives. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," shift to, "I'm still learning this skill." Instead of, "Everything will go wrong," try, "I can handle whatever comes." These statements acknowledge the difficulty without exaggerating it into catastrophe. Your brain accepts grounded thinking far more easily than fake optimism, and once it accepts it, your emotions begin to settle down. You're essentially offering your mind a calmer, more truthful story to follow instead of letting it narrate chaos. Over time, this becomes a muscle you train. Every negative thought gives you a chance to rewrite the script with something rational. You don't need to feel motivated to do it, you just need to catch the thought, question it, and respond with something more reasonable. That tiny shift weakens negative pathways in your brain and strengthens new, healthier ones. This is literally how mental habits are rewired. Repetition builds new thought patterns the same way lifting weights builds muscle. You're teaching your mind to evaluate situations instead of dramatizing them. Eventually, you'll notice something huge. Instead of automatically thinking the worst, your brain begins defaulting to balanced thinking. Negativity loses the spotlight because your mind has learned there are other interpretations besides doom. That doesn't mean you'll never have bad thoughts again, it means they won't dominate the conversation. Reality becomes louder than fear. And when reality wins, your emotions stabilize, your confidence grows, and life becomes way less stressful. It's not magic, it's mental conditioning, done one thought at a time. Control your inputs, control your thoughts. A huge part of negative thinking doesn't even start inside your mind. It gets triggered by what you feed your brain daily. You are basically a reflection of what you watch, read, scroll, and listen to. If your timeline is full of drama, bad news, negativity, toxic influencers, and people flexing unrealistic lifestyles, your brain automatically starts comparing, panicking, or assuming the world is falling apart. It's not a mystery why negativity becomes your default response when the content entering your brain is constantly pushing fear, insecurity, and pressure. Garbage in, garbage out applies to thoughts just as much as computers. If you want your mind to stop spiraling, you need to curate your environment like your mental space actually matters. That means unfollowing accounts that drain your energy instead of adding value, muting people who trigger insecurity or anger, and reducing exposure to news that only exists to shock and scare you. It might feel small or even silly, but protecting what enters your brain is the same as protecting your mental health. When your daily inputs shift from chaos to clarity, your thoughts automatically start feeling lighter, calmer, and less anxious because your brain is no longer running on fear signals. Your real environment counts too. If you spend your time around people who complain nonstop, gossip, criticize everything, or always point out the dark side of life, you will feel pulled into their emotional gravity. Humans absorb moods more easily than they absorb facts. Negativity spreads in groups faster than positivity ever will. So choose your circle with intention. Spend more time with people who build, improve, create, and speak with curiosity instead of doom. Even small upgrades in your social environment have a massive effect on how your mind processes situations. When you finally clean up your inputs, both online and offline, you create mental space for clearer, more rational thinking. Your brain stops swimming in noise and finds room to process things logically instead of reactively. Suddenly, negative thoughts don't feel like the only channel playing in your head because you've opened the door to new perspectives and better information. Controlling your environment isn't running away from reality. It's giving yourself the mental fuel to handle reality without drowning in stress. When you feed your brain better content, your thoughts naturally start reshaping into something healthier, sharper, and more grounded. Build tiny wins to shift your mindset. One reason negative thoughts dominate your brain is because they feed on helplessness. When your mind feels like you're stuck or failing or going nowhere, negativity becomes its default explanation for everything. The easiest way to break that pattern isn't by thinking differently, but by doing something, anything, that proves to your brain you're not powerless. Tiny wins are like evidence drops that challenge the negative narrative. Every time you complete a task, no matter how small, your brain gets a hit of success chemistry, and suddenly the world feels less hopeless and more manageable. These tiny wins don't need to be dramatic or groundbreaking. You can start with ridiculously small actions like making your bed, drinking water, finishing a short exercise, reading 2 pages, or clearing your desk. Each task tells your brain, look, we're capable. That small dose of achievement interrupts the inner dialogue that says you're lazy, failing, or stuck. You begin proving negativity wrong not through arguments, but through action. Momentum is the biggest enemy of self-doubt because the moment you're moving, even slowly, your brain stops assuming disaster is guaranteed. Over time, these micro-successes turn into a chain reaction. One small task leads to another, and the emotional fog that negativity creates begins to lift. Instead of thinking, I can't do anything right, you start recognizing, I'm actually making progress. The shift is subtle but powerful. Your brain slowly learns to trust you again. It realizes that you can handle life, improve yourself, and take action even when you don't feel motivated or confident. And once your brain sees enough proof, negative thoughts lose credibility because reality is showing a different story. This is why people who take action feel mentally lighter than those who sit and think about taking action. Your mood does not create motion, motion creates mood. You don't need to be inspired to start, you need to start to feel inspired. Tiny wins stack up over days and weeks until they form a new identity. Someone who follows through, someone who grows, someone who tries. And when that identity kicks in, your brain no longer automatically assumes the worst. because it has too much real-world evidence that you are capable, improving, and stronger than your thoughts make you believe. Talk to yourself like you'd talk to someone you care about. One of the biggest sources of negative thinking is the way we speak to ourselves inside our own heads. Most people talk to themselves in a tone they would never use on someone they love, or even a stranger. When you make a mistake, mess up in public, or fail at something, your brain instantly goes into attack mode. You're stupid, you ruined everything, you'll never get it right. Imagine saying that to a younger sibling or a close friend. It would sound cruel. Yet somehow, we think it's normal to use that tone on ourselves. But the brain listens to every word you tell it, and when the language becomes harsh, your thoughts become darker without you even realizing why. Changing your self-talk doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means offering yourself the same fairness and compassion you naturally give others. If you saw someone you care about struggling, you wouldn't say, "Wow, you're pathetic." You'd say, "It's okay, everyone messes up," or, "You can try again tomorrow." Speaking to yourself in that realistic, supportive way softens the emotional reaction around failure and removes the shame that keeps negativity looping. The tone you use with yourself literally shapes how safe or unsafe your brain feels existing in the world. This shift becomes especially powerful when things go wrong. Instead of turning every mistake into a personal attack, you start treating it like a problem to solve or an experience to learn from. Suddenly, failure stops being a threat to your identity and becomes something normal that humans deal with. This mindset protects your confidence and keeps negativity from exploding into a full spiral. You are no longer pouring gasoline on the fire inside your mind. You're calming the flames long enough to think clearly and move forward rationally. With practice, your inner voice becomes a tool of stability instead of self-destruction. You don't need dramatic self-love speeches or cheesy affirmations. You just need to stop bullying yourself over every flaw and show yourself basic respect. When your inner dialogue turns kinder, your brain stops reacting like every mistake is a life-ending crisis. Negative thoughts lose their emotional force because the voice narrating your life finally sounds like someone who wants you to win instead of someone trying to tear you down. And that tiny shift has the power to change how you experience every day going forward. Rewiring the brain takes time, but it's worth it. Stopping negative thinking isn't a one-day glow-up where your brain magically becomes sunshine and rainbows forever. It's more like training a stubborn muscle that has been doing the wrong movement for years. Negative thoughts become habits over time because the brain repeats pathways that feel familiar, even if they're painful. So the final step is understanding that rewiring your thinking takes consistency, awareness, and patience. You're basically teaching your brain a new language, and just like learning anything meaningful, it vibes better with practice than perfection. The important thing is that every time you notice, question, replace, or interrupt a negative thought, you are weakening the old mental pattern and strengthening a new one. One of the most empowering things you can realize is that you aren't trying to eliminate negativity forever. You're learning to manage it intelligently. Your brain will always throw random thoughts your way, some positive, some pointless, some dark, some useful. The win isn't having zero negative thoughts. The win is having the skill to recognize them for what they are and respond instead of react. Once you build that skill, negative thinking stops feeling like an enemy you are constantly fighting and turns into just another mental process you know how to handle. That shift transforms the whole mental landscape from chaos to clarity. As you practice the techniques across all the previous parts, noticing thoughts, challenging them, moving your body, feeding your brain better inputs, stacking small wins, and speaking to yourself fairly, you'll start seeing changes without forcing them. Certain worries won't hit the same way. Old triggers won't feel as heavy. Spirals that once lasted an entire day might shrink to 10 minutes or disappear altogether. That's your brain rewiring itself in real time. The science behind neuroplasticity shows that thought pathways physically change with repetition. Every time you refuse to believe a negative thought, you're literally building a new brain environment. And the coolest part? When negative thinking stops dominating your mind, space opens up for better things: creativity, focus, problem solving, ambition, curiosity, even peace. You start living instead of overthinking. You stop reacting and start choosing. Life doesn't become perfect, but you become mentally stronger than whatever life throws at you. That's the long game, not living without fear or stress, but learning how to navigate them with clarity, intelligence, and control. Bit by bit, you prove to yourself that you're not a prisoner of your thoughts. You're the one in charge.